Hi, everyone. I just want to welcome everybody and thank you for coming today. All right, my name is Beau Porter. I'm a firefighter for Los Angeles City Fire Department, where I've been going on 20 years this December, where I hold the rank of firefighter paramedic. And I work at a fire station in South Los Angeles for the better part of 18 years, Fire Station 33. My biggest thing that I want to say today is that I have no background, no certifications in any type of mental health. I'm not selling any books at the back. I'm not doing this for financial purposes or promotional purposes, right? I'm here because I went through a dark time 3 years ago and 12 days when one of my best friends, my classmate, my coworker died unexpectedly. And that sent me down a dark hole and basically culminated at my wife telling me that she didn't want me around my daughter anymore because I was scaring her. And that was basically the straw that broke the camel's back. I told her I'd do whatever she needed, go to whatever counseling, recovery center, you name it, to save the one thing that I cared about more than anything, which is my family. And in that process, when I came out the other side, I was inspired to put together a drill, because what amazed me was the 15 plus years that I had at the time, I'd never heard any of this stuff before. And so my first inclination was I got to tell people about it. And so at the time I'd worked for a better part of 15 years at the same station with the same people. And so one of the scariest moments of my life was presenting pretty much this exact same PowerPoint that I'm going to give you today to them. It was like the first day of school. It was a coming out party of basically something that was taboo for anybody to talk about. Mental health and the struggle that we face in the line of work that we do and the life that we live, and how much that impacts us day in and day out. After giving this PowerPoint to them almost 2 years ago, they gave me a standing ovation. And that ovation afterwards inspired me to not only think of myself and my immediate crew, but everyone else, because it hit a nerve and it became personal and relatable. And so for that, this is the PowerPoint that I gave 2 years ago. I hope it impacts you as well. The big thing with us and where we always look at people that we see as greater than ourselves. And so for me, as well as a lot of other firefighters, we look to the Navy SEALs as the ultimate, right? And so I asked this question of how long a Navy SEAL is expected to tread water. Most people will say, pool comp, 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, right? Well, the truth in that statement of the expectation of a Navy SEAL is to tread water forever, right? And so the immediate reaction that you have when you hear that is, well, that's impossible, right? And that is true, but the expectation is there that they're expected to tread water forever. So I bring that to our scenario, and the fact is of how many calls are we expected to go on in a 30-year career, right? Well, in that same awe-inspiring moment, it's all of them, right? We don't have a chance to, I'm busy. Hey, I'm on the phone with significant other. We're going through something right now. I'm on the phone with my son before he goes out for his big baseball game. Like the bell goes off, we go, right? And so just as daunting of a task of treading water forever is just as daunting as running every single call in a 30-year career. So with that, just kind of getting the air out, we're all crazy, right? And the fact is that craziness is basically broken down into two very significant tells that each of us have. A psychology student out of Florida. She was had her master's. She was going for her doctorate in psychology, and she come from a first responder family, and so she wanted to know what made us tick, and so she sent out 1,000 surveys to all sorts of departments, different sizes, entities, paid call, volunteer, and basically went through a psychology questionnaire and found the two most common traits. First one is resilience, right? It's the fact that we're constantly going forward no matter what, right? Resilient. So whether it's a forcible entry problem, whether it's water issues, whether there's not enough hose, whether you haven't slept, right? Or whether you're forced to work longer hours, whether it's 2 o'clock in the morning, you haven't gone to bed yet, those aren't problems for us. We just keep driving forward, right? We just are resilient enough to just say, yep, nope, still good, I'm still good, I'm still good, I'm still good. It's the same reason why those fellow coworkers that I gave this PowerPoint to, after struggling so hard for so long, a lot of them didn't even know I had a problem, right? The second one is hypervigilance. This is that heightened state of awareness that's fueled by adrenaline and aided by training, right? This is the ability where an average person, you pull up in front of a house fire and you go, okay, what do you see? And they're like, oh my gosh, that house is on fire, right? But not us, right? You pull me up in front of a single family dwelling, fire showing in the front room, 2 o'clock in the morning, just woke up about 6 minutes prior, right, from a sound sleep, and you go, what do you see? And I go, well, here's my forcible entry problems, my ladder placement, primary and secondary, my roof size, ventilation technique that I would use on this specific one, my areas of concern if I'm making an interior attack, where my hose line is going to be, what size hose line is going to be, and how much I'm going to need, right? All in 3 to 5 seconds when I first see that building, right? That hypervigilance is what we train on since we're the first day that we walk into the firehouse, right? It's, oh, did the trash get taken out? Are the heads clean, right? Hey, did this floor get mopped? Did somebody already mop it? What's next, right? That hypervigilance that we train on all the time, right? So whether we have a little bit of it when we get on or none of it, we're trained into this hypervigilant state, so we're able to give a scene size up at 2 in the morning. We're able to go through our forcible entry problems. We're able to find the ladder placement that we need in these hectic scenarios, right? Well, the problem is with both of these traits is the less sleep that you get, the more stress that you're under, it starts to heighten those things, okay, to where they don't shut off. Okay, so making these decisions in the spur of the moment, right? It's the same as taking the veteran versus the probationary member, right? If I take the probationary member and put him in front of that, or her in front of that single family dwelling fire, right, at 2 in the morning, my expectation from the senior firefighter are two different things, right? I like to say, as a probationary member, you see through about the size of a dime, to where when you're a task force commander, you're in your experienced career, you're able to see a poster size, right? And it's that education, training, and repetition that gets you to that point, right? That training, right? But when you're not trained, it's easy to get overwhelmed and make bad decisions, right? It's better to train before the actual fire, right? It's these traits and experience and training are great for work, but they're horrible for home, right? Like I said before, you should be able to turn them on and off. But what happens is over the course of our career and life happening, it gets to the point where it just stays on all the time, right? And some examples of this are the fact that, as you know, you're on a long 72-hour work day or work period, right? So you've been at the station for 3 days, slept here and there, right? And now all you want to do is get home, right? So you slamming the Celsius or the coffee all the way home, trying to make it home. All you want to do is see your family, and then all of a sudden you pull into the driveway and you see that the toys are left out for the 3 days you've been gone, the lawn hasn't been mowed, the trash cans are still out from 3 days prior, right? And then that hypervigilant state, it just keeps driving it up, right? Driving it up. And so we take we take a number all the time of where our patients are at, right? When we go out on a medical call, we ask their chest pain, hey, how bad is it? A 10 being the worst pain you ever felt, 0 being nothing, right? So I urge people to now take a number on themselves, right? And I kind of like to say, arrive at less than a 5, but really take some self-awareness and figure out where you're at when you're walking through that front door. Give your sense of home the best chance for success, right? Or another thing that I commonly say is don't ruin your 4-day in the first 15 minutes, right? And so our 4-day is our period of off time that we get between segments. And that's the biggest thing is the whole reason we're at work is for our family, to provide for our family, right? And so what happens is with this increased state that we get in, right, this repetitive, basically onslaught that we have with increased call loads, decreased workforce, right, is we're driven into these things where, unfortunately, no matter how much time off we take, we're stuck in these two traits where we can't turn it off and we end up robbing from our family, right? And so with that training, it's time for your mental training to begin to help be able to turn this on and off and what all this is about. So obviously the elephant in the room here is the firefighter death. For the first time ever, suicide outpaced the line of duty deaths, right, over the last several years. Suicidal ideation is not when you should begin seeking help, right? The classic, coffee table scene with the bottle of Jack Daniels and the 9mm shouldn't be the time where you're like, oh, you know what, I'm going to call that psychiatrist, right? Don't not call him. Absolutely call him if you're faced with that. But just like we wouldn't put a first day probationary firefighter at the largest commercial fire they've ever been to in the first 5 seconds and hope for the best outcome, right? So let's start getting that training and that knowledge base beforehand, right? So if you think of stress as fishing weights, right? I'm a big fisherman. I like fishing. That's kind of my jam, right? And so if you think of stress as this tiny little fishing weights, right? And they're being applied to you as you try to tread water and keep your head above basically the swimming pool of life, right? Kind of going back to that Navy SEAL treading water, right? So we're out there treading water in the pool of life, and we got this vest on, and we start hanging these little weights, some bigger than others, right? Larger stressors or bigger weights, right? Different calls and such that you go on, or stresses of life, kind of smaller weights, right? But dealing with these weights allows you to cut them off and keep your head above water. So don't wait to call for a flotation device when your head is already under the water, right? Rather than before when you notice that you're just starting to have to swim a little harder. And it's that resilience, in my case especially, right? That resilience level that you're like, nah, I'm good. Nah, I'm good. Nah, I'm good. I'm good. Right? Because that's what we do every day. It's, oh, hey, can you work today? Yeah, sure. Yeah, I haven't slept in 4 days, but sure, yeah, I'm good. Right? That resilience level is what gets us to where we're in a full panic swim, still telling the lifeguard, no, we're good. We're good. Right? So mental health versus behavioral health, right? They're used often interchangeably, but they're different in many ways. Mental health is how you think. It's the clinical diagnosis versus how you feel, right, or the symptoms. So the clinical diagnoses are the ones that we, in a 911 scenario, deal with all the time, right? The worst of it, right? So the clinical diagnoses are the depression, the anxiety, bipolar, schizophrenia, right? The big name ones, right? But rather than focus on the name of what the diagnosis is, it should be more than just the symptoms. Right? And the symptoms are, for depression, increased irritability all the way up to hopelessness, right? Anxiety, feeling overwhelmed, to full-on panic. Bipolar is that periods of depression and mania, and then an extreme hyperactivity, right? Back and forth. And then schizophrenia is where you lose touch with reality, right? The worst, okay? So, whereas mental health is that, behavioral health now is how you act. Right? And so this one, your classic ones, and if you notice throughout this PowerPoint, at the bottom there, everything's bibliographed, right? My thing is I'm not the message here. This isn't me personally, something that I came up with and I'm just shooting from the hip up here. All the stuff that I found when I was putting this drill together is all bibliographed in the bottom corner of where I got it from, okay? And so from Chapman University, this is their behavioral health kind of outline, right? And these are their examples: substance abuse, gambling, risky behavior, self-injury, and eating disorders. It's the classic behavioral health things that you'll see. But what I want to do is break it down into our speak, right? So substance abuse, okay? The two main coping mechanisms that we're told when we get on the fire department, or we're shown when we get on the fire department: working out and drinking. Okay, those are the two. Those are the only two that I'd ever been shown, right? And so the thing is like guys are like, oh, well, he's drinking, he's got a problem, right? No, it's the more than normal, right? And what I mean by this, just personal experience, right, is you may go home, have a tough day at work, get your chores done, whatever you have to make up, have a beer with dinner, and go to bed. No big deal, right? Some stress comes along, it goes to 2 beers. It goes to putting your loved ones down. I'm going to stay up a little bit. I got that show I want to watch. And then you're having 3 beers. Then it's a 6-pack. And it's hiding beers in the neighbor's trash cans, right? Then it's lying to your loved one that the guys at work are doing this whiskey tasting thing, so I'm going to buy a bunch of bottles of whiskey and I'm going to try them all because we're comparing at work, right? Where it starts to slide down the path of normal, right? And what everybody's normal is a little different, but it should be on you to notice that you're sliding, right? Where 1 turns into 6, right? And that sliding scale of understanding and keeping awareness of yourself, right? The gambling and the risky behavior. Guys are like, oh, I don't even go to Vegas, right? It's not about that. It's about throwing it all away, right? And the number one thing that I put in this category is DUIs, right? A lot of people are like, oh, he's got a drinking problem. Well, I think it's deeper than that, because every one of us that get into this field had to go through a background investigation, right? For me, growing up, being a 3rd-generation firefighter for LA City, I lived my entire time growing up in my adolescence of fear of the background investigator. Whether it was going to a party on Friday night, whether it was drinking with the buddies, right? It was, nope, background investigator's gonna find out about it, can't do it, right? Because that was my fear. But the one thing that we've always had before, up until getting on the job, plus afterwards, is DUIs, right? It was a no-no. It always has been, always will be a no-no. Not just of the fact that you're breaking the law, but we have that direct insight of what it can cause, right? Where it's an absolute do not do, right? We've been on the 2, 3 o'clock in the morning incident where we go and it's the DUI, where he hits a family of 4, kills all 4 of them, and he's standing over there on the sidewalk wondering where his car's at, right? We've seen that. We've explained it to the family members where they've lost a member in that car wreck, right? And so DUIs are an absolute no-no for us. But then you see how when we go down this path, it becomes explainable suddenly, right? Where it's like, oh, I've had a couple of beers, I'm fine, right? It's that resiliency that gets played and played and played to where now you get a DUI, right? The self-injury. Well, self-injury normally would be described as, the cutting that you see in adolescent teens, right? But I kind of go off of that into the self-destructive behavior of us, right? The self-injury for us is that resiliency rearing its ugly head. And maybe the argument that you normally would be like, you know what, just let it go. Cooler heads prevail. It's that all-in mentality, right? You go in and you start, barking about some things that you noticed that didn't get done while you were at work. And normally you'd be like, hey, you know what? I'm tired. Let's just talk about this later. I'm going to try to take a nap, right? Or maybe this isn't the best time for me to start this argument right now, right? But instead, that self-injury, that self-destructive behavior goes, no, I'm all in. Let's do this right now, right? And so it has that decision-making capability of not so much risky behavior like the DUIs, but the self-destructive mode of the one thing that you care about the most, which is your family, right? And you're willing to take that risk with your family of saying horrible things that you'd never say before, right? Because you're not clear-minded. And the eating disorders, not the bulimia or the anorexia that you hear about so frequently in behavioral health issues, it's more with us, it's going to be those fad diets, right? Where you're searching for control, right? It's whatever latest and greatest thing is, and then on to the next thing the next week, and the next week, and the next week. And it's not so much because you're trying to get healthy, right? It's because you're searching for control of something, because your life is out of control and you just want something, and food is something you can control. So I'm going to do that. And you see where you're not all in. And then you see somebody who shows up to work and they spent $300 on the latest craze, and then 2 weeks later, they're on to the next thing. And you're like, well, you're not really doing it all in to where you're trying to get healthy. It's something else going on, right? So the negative behavior in these things, it doesn't always accompany these conditions, right? Most with depression experience sleep issues, but not everyone that has sleep issues is depressed, right? When a distinct behavior begins to be destructive or go beyond the personal norms, right? That self-awareness or even that group awareness that I'll get into in a little bit of noticing that basically that normal that you have and veering away from it, right? That's when it becomes a disorder. That's when it requires psychiatric treatment, okay? But my biggest thing is avoid worrying about the labels and what it is, right? Anxiety, depression, right? Because what happens is we have such a skewed view of what those things are because of who we go on, right? We get a 911 call on an extremely depressed person, right? And so for us, like, that's what that looks like, right? The person that's, on a bender, been, drinking for 3 days, illicit drugs on top of that, they're off their meds for 2 months, all that stuff. We go on the highly agitated person that we now take a mental picture and be like, oh, depression? No, I know what that looks like. That's not me, right? Because our minds are so skewed to those extremes, right? So that's why I stay away from the labels and more of just the self-awareness of what types of symptoms and how far from your norm that you are. So mental health, what is it, right? So we just go to the dictionary, right? So the American Heritage Dictionary defines it as a state of emotional and psychological well-being in which an individual is able to use their cognitive and emotional capacities, function in society, and meet the ordinary demands of everyday life. Well, that's a word salad, okay? So I found another definition that I liked a little bit better that kind of breaks it down a little bit more simply. And it's a state of balance both within and with the environment. So kind of goes back to the well-known version of this is maintaining balance, right? Physical, psychological, cultural, spiritual, and other interrelated factors participate in producing this balance, right? So how do we get off balance? Well, there's two types of stress, okay? There's eustress, okay, or positive stress, which is that motivating, focuses your energy, it's short-term, it improves your performance, it feels exciting, it's within your coping abilities. Like for me today, right? Presenting in front of you guys, positive stress, right? Staying up late, going over my notes, making sure everything's good, but it's improving my performance, right? It's exciting, and it's short-term, okay? Examples of this, right? Promotion, new job, responsibility, marriage, new relationship, buying a home, moving, having a kid, learning a new skill or hobby, getting certified on rigs, right? Promoting to a different new job, first day jitters, all that stuff, right? That's all good stress, okay? So what's negative stress, right? Or distress, right? This is where it causes the anxiety or the concern. It can be short or long-term. It can be cumulative or a single event. It feels unpleasant or uncomfortable. It decreases your performance. It leads to mental and physical setbacks, and it's outside of your coping abilities. Okay? Examples of this: death of a spouse, family member, or close friend, divorce or a breakup, losing contact with loved ones, injury or illness, conflict in interpersonal relationships, money, sleeping problems, children having problems at school. Okay? And so this is from Dr. Lazarus at the UC Berkeley. Okay? They come from a list of 25 of the most common negative stressors. Okay? And so usually 2 to 3 of those is when you should start, seeking some outside counsel, right? But just over the last 3 years of life and being a first responder in those 3 years, it's pretty much led to mostly everybody having all of them. Okay? So the sources of that bad stress can be both work and internal. Okay, so the work ones: excessive job demands, job insecurity, conflicts with coworkers or supervisors, inadequate authority necessary to carry out tasks, a lack of training necessary to do the job, unproductive or time-consuming meetings, commuting and travel schedules. Okay? Once again, this is straight out of the psychology book from UC Berkeley, but I'm sure that several of those ring true to you personally, especially with the job that we do and where it's at in the world today. Some internal ones: personal fears, repetitive thought patterns, worrying about future events. Big one for me is unrealistic perfectionist expectations. Okay? One of the things that comes with our line of work is that perfectionist expectation, right? Because we have to be perfect all the time, right? We're constantly shooting for perfection, whether it's after an EMS run or after a fire with the hot wash, right? We go over, okay, who made what mistakes, right? How do we get better? How do we not do that, right? Here, let me tell you about the fire I went to and all the mistakes I made so you don't make them, right? It's the perfectionist expectation all the time. The problem relies is when we start building our own stressors, when we have that unrealistic perfectionist expectation all the time, whether it be at home or at work, right? The overscheduling, the failing to be assertive, right? Or the procrastination and failing to plan ahead. So how do we deal with all those things? Because I'm sure most of us going through those lists of both work and internal stressors, we've had a couple on there. So how do we deal with them, right? Coping, okay? Defined is to deal with and attempt to overcome problems and difficulties. The one I like better is to maintain a contest or combat, usually on even terms or with success, right? So if we're contesting or combating those stressors, we got to have even terms, right, if we want success. And so how do we get on even terms? Well, we start to understand the enemy, right, which is that bad stress, right? We have to know how they work, right? An art of war, if you will, against these stressors. Okay, so the basic process is integral to adaptation and survival, the process of coping. Okay, it's back to the beginning when I talked about cutting those weights off, right? It depicts how people detect, appraise, deal with, and learn from stressful encounters. Okay, the common type for us, it's problem solving, right? You give us a problem, we'll solve it, right? That's how we deal with most of our factors that we come in contact with, right? It's problem solving. Another one is information seeking, right? Looking it up, researching it, right? Cognitive restructuring, that's a big one. I'll get to that in a minute, right? Emotional expression. So if anybody has been to a kitchen table in the last 3 years, I'm sure you've heard some of this, right? Venting is emotional expression. It can be a positive way, right, to get rid of some stress or some blow off steam, right? But when it gets into the toxic area is when it's repetitive, right? Back to those repetitive thoughts, right? So if every day at the kitchen table it's the exact same thing with no other types of coping associated with it, it's just the same thing over and over. It starts to build that bad stress up because it basically starts urging towards hopelessness, right? Where it's just the same repetitive thing every day, day in and day out, right? Some other coping strategies are going to be distraction, distancing, avoidance, wishful thinking, acceptance, seeking social support, and denial altogether. But not one of these universal coping strategies will be effective in all situations, right? A lot of times it's mixing, matching, maybe some information seeking versus some problem solving, right? Maybe some venting to start and then kind of clear your head and then start to get into the problem solving and the information seeking, okay? So there's two different categories of coping strategies. There's problem focus versus emotion focused. I know most of us live in the problem focused, not so much emotion focused, right? That E word kind of, for me, up until 3 years ago, emotion focused, that I'd have to have emotions for you to hurt them, right? And so this was all new to me. Coping is a process rather than a single event, right? So it's not so much where it happens, you cope with it, move on, right? And we'll get into that reoccurring stress, but it's the fact that it's a process of going through it to where it doesn't rear its ugly head later on. So here's a little chart for people who like charts, okay? Basically just takes you through kind of this journey of coping. So you start out with your stressors, right? And the perception filter of your background, what education you have, right? And you basically make this primary appraisal, right? You figure out whether it's positive, irrelevant, or dangerous, right? When you break into the dangerous category, is it a challenge, threat of harm or loss, right? And then you have this secondary appraisal of this analysis of it, where you figure out, do you have the sufficient resources to handle this stressor, or do you have insufficient resources? And then it becomes stress, right? Once you've basically outdone your coping abilities, right? And then once you get into the coping with that stress, it goes into those two categories I just mentioned, problem-focused versus emotion-focused. Problem-focused is the change, the situation itself, right? What we're good at, problem-solving, okay? Or the emotion-focused one, which is basically changing the relationship to the situation, okay? And then your reappraisal, or your learning from it, right? Your hot wash, if you will, of dealing with that stress. Okay, so that problem focus is the primary coping strategy, right? It basically is that effort to alter the stressful situation itself. Problem solving, piece of cake, right? The emotion focus is the one that's a lot different and new for a lot of people, especially in our line of work, right? And it's that cognitive restructuring, okay? It's the changing the way you think. Guys are like, well, I'm set in my ways, this is the way I do it, plenty good, right? And I urge you to not think that way. And the biggest one, just take a common problem that you have, and every department's a little bit different. Our biggest stressor for firefighters, or one of them, I should say, is wall time, right? We have the unique opportunity to basically do our ambulances as well as our fire resources. And so with that transporting resource, we hold the wall with a lot of patients. And so that causes a lot of angst among members, right? And so 4 to 6 hours on the wall, babysitting a homeless person, right, is met with a ton of angst because it's, you can go down the laundry list, right? It's a waste of our time, it's a waste of money, it's a waste of my talent, it should be somebody else, they should put them in bunk beds, all the different, various fixes that they've come up with over the years, right? But it's not going away, right? And that's way above our pay grade, right? And so cognitive restructuring is something that I've kind of adopted, and it kind of works, right? And what you would do in that same scenario is, rather than, you walk out of the hospital after dumping that patient after 4 hours, right, and finally getting to bed and having the same old conversation, what a waste of time. Cognitive restructuring puts it at, can you believe we just made like $250 babysitting that guy? I don't know anywhere else that I can hang out with my buddy for 4 hours in air conditioning and fluorescent poisoning, making $250. Like, that's pretty awesome. Where do you want to eat, right? And just that restructuring of that stressor makes it not a bad stressor anymore, right? And so just that cognitive restructuring is what you can take those daily stressors that can accumulate and cause other problems, restructure them into something that's not a big deal, and you move on from, right? Now with the bigger problems, right? These are some emotion-focused coping strategies that help with them, right? Meditation, right? Basically meditating on it, thinking on it, cognitively thinking your way through those stressors, okay? Journaling, this is one that was super helpful and I still use it to this day. I don't like journaling as the name for it, simply for the fact that as I always think back to my daughter's journal with the little key that she hides under her pillow like we don't know where it is. And that's just not me. So I go with the brain dumping, right? Same thing, just a little bit different name, okay? And basically what it is taking all the stressors that you have and just throwing it on a paper. Everything that you're worried about, everything that you're thinking about, everything that's troubling you or keeping you up at night, you just write it on a piece of paper, right? And what that does is it's scientific in a way, but basically what it does is it helps you, one, process what you're thinking, right? And starts putting words to that noise that you hear, right? But also what I've found to be super helpful is a lot of times I don't like to talk about my feelings, right? Especially to my coworker, to my significant other, right? Like the last thing I want to do is get home from a busy day at work with all the stressors and, my wife goes, oh, how's your day, right? Well, and then I want to go into a 2-hour dissertation about all the stress that I have at work, right? No, that's not what we do. We go, we're fine. Resiliency kicks off and you're like, what else we got? We don't worry about work, it's fine, right? Or whatever else you have going on, right? Financial struggles, right? Sick parents, right? As you get to that age where all of a sudden you start losing loved ones, immediate family or otherwise, right? And that's weighing on you, okay? So this brain dumping exercise, basically a way for you to write it all down. And like for me, like I said, I can just give it to her. Be like, here you go. And a lot of times that understanding of just looking at a full page of things is enough understanding to help not attack it by myself anymore, but start to have that team environment, just like I have at work, have it at home, right? To where maybe instead of having the argument or, I understand that you're tired, right? And using it in a negative thing, you start having a team concept where you get home and you tell your wife or significant other, you tell her, you know what, I'm at an 8 right now. And she's like, no problem. Get something to eat, take a nap. I'm going to take the kid to practice. I'll see you this afternoon, right? And start setting up yourself for success like we talked about at the beginning, right? And that brain dumping is a great way to do it when you're having it, where you're starting to feel yourself build up and you can't get it all out because there's just so many things. Just start writing it down, right? The reframing, okay, is another way of emotion-focused coping strategy, okay? Reframing is looking from a different angle, right? And it gets into the reframing of things with the cognitive distortion versus your positive thinking, okay? So cognitive distortions is where your mind starts to lie to you. It's the same reason why you don't tell your wife what's bothering you, right? She's just going to tell me I'm stupid anyways, right? It's that catastrophizing where you're already have an outcome before you even tried, right? And it starts to distort your mind to where it basically lies to you. And it makes it to where you don't say anything, right? And it's like, they'll just make fun of me. No, I'm not gonna say anything. Or your buddy hits you up like, hey man, you all right? Yeah, I'm fine, right? Because you've already made it up in your head that he'd just laugh at you anyways, or tell the guys and they'd all make fun of you, right? And so your brain starts to try to protect itself and it builds these walls, right? That are all fake, right? And it's until that first time that you reach out to your buddy, right? Or you reach out to your wife or your family friend, right? And then all of a sudden they're like, oh yeah, no, man, I had a friend go through this exact same thing. And you're like, what? No, but I'm the only one, right? And your brain has been lying to you that whole time, right? And so instead of having that cognitive distortion or that negative mind lock or mind protection that your brain's built up for itself, start having positive thinking. And yes, this is not easy, especially if you're already down the road a bit, right? But I urge you, just like everything else, right? Just like buying a boat, just like buying a house, just like getting a timeshare, going on a vacation, right? You can take that to the station and ask somebody, and somebody's got something, right? Somebody owns a boat that you want to buy. Somebody has a car that's the one, like the one the wife wants, right? That you can talk to or hit up on what the maintenance problems are and all that stuff, right? And so the same way with this, right? Is putting yourself out there expecting the best, right? And not setting yourself up for failure. So some other coping mechanisms, right, is lowering your expectations. Well, I always say this one, and guys are like, whoa, hold on a second. Lower my expectations. Let's not get crazy, okay? And by no means am I saying lower my expectations on what my standards are, okay? So it doesn't say lower your standards. It says lower your expectations, right? So this kind of goes along the same lines as setting yourself up for success, okay? If you go in every shift and you're like, okay, I'm going to get 2 meals on time, 12 and 5. I'm going to get a workout in, get an uninterrupted shower. I'm going to I'll probably get a couple of games of handball, paddle tennis, what have you, right? And maybe we'll go on runs, but fires only, right? If you set yourself up every single shift like that, you're setting yourself up for disappointment, right? Because every time it's not going to happen. And then the first time you start working out and you get a call, you're like, oh, that's it. This day sucks, right? But if instead, you just set up simple tasks, right, for that day, right? So this is the one where I tell people, the book that you got for Christmas 2 Christmases ago that still has some of the gift wrap still on it, right, that you really had to have, right? Break that thing out. Throw it in your locker. Say, hey, you know what? I'm going to do 5 pages a day. 5 pages. And if you're like, hey, you know what? I can't read like that. I lose my place. Take a highlighter, right? And set up a simple task. Some days for me, it's just getting my laundry done, right? And it may be 11:59 at night when I finally pull that stuff out of the dryer, especially if the laundry fairy didn't come, right? But I pull it out of the dryer and I look at the clock and I go, all right, I won today, right? And so that's what lowering your expectations is setting yourself up for success and having realistic goals for that day, right? Asking others for help or advice, okay? Basically, the person who knows best what you're going through is the one sitting right next to you, whether it be in the fire truck, ambulance, what have you, right? They've been on the same calls you have, right? They're experiencing life the same way you are. And so asking them for advice, just like you would if you're building a deck or putting in a pool or buying a car, right? Should be the same expectation that you have when you're asking them about stuff like this, okay? Taking responsibility, right? That extreme ownership, right? If you've heard of Jocko Willink, Navy SEAL commander, okay? He's all about extreme ownership. He even wrote a book on it. Extreme ownership is taking full ownership of all of your entire life, right? And so not being able to push it off on other people. Oh, that's so-and-so's problem. No, that's so-and-so's problem. That's not my fault, right? Extreme ownership is taking it all on. This is all on me, and I'm going to own all of it, right? And that helps in our problem-solving mind get your head around it, right? Kind of back to that brain dumping aspect where you're taking extreme ownership for all of the problems and stressors you have, and now we're gonna start to tackle these things, okay? Engaging in problem solving, right? Pros versus cons, the old Venn diagram where you got good stuff, bad stuff, and stuff that doesn't matter in the middle, right? Working your way through those problems. Maintaining emotionally supportive relationships. Okay, so the big thing with this one is the toxic relationships, okay? The ones that bring you down, okay? And one of the biggest toxic relationships that guys have at the fire station nowadays is the phone, okay? You get stuck in the scroll hole and it's all negative all the time, right? And then you add on your daily stressors, add on to whatever the matrix says your stressors should be in your feed, right? And then it's just a constant negative feed. And so if you want to be stuck in madness, it's there for you. It's one app away, right? And so if you're noticing that you're spending a lot more time stuck in that scroll hole and not engaging with you're kind of isolating yourself, right? Maybe it's time to put that thing down. Maybe what it was meant to be for, right? It's call your loved ones when you have some downtime, right? Or reach out to buddies that you haven't talked to in a while, or they may be off IOD, right? Reach out, see how they're doing, okay? And then obviously maintaining those emotional composure, right? The hardest one for us, because anytime we dial up the stress, dial down the sleep, right, that temper comes flaring. And this goes for work and at home, right? Unfortunately, for whatever reason, we're definitely, when we're getting paid, we're a lot less likely to lose our temper when we're not, right? And that's the part that eats at me all the time. Because I give this drill all the time, or I have for the last 2 years or so, I'm no expert, right? And as you go through these mental health checklists and understanding and mental training, right, and understanding these different definitions, it doesn't get easier. It actually gets harder at first because now you know better, right? And so there's a way, it's an additional stressor because you get mad at yourself. It's the same way if, the number one cardinal rule for laddering is you don't throw over the entry point, doors, windows, and then you go and throw a ladder at a big commercial fire right over the rolling steel door, right? And you're like, what was that? And you're like, I know better than that. I know better, right? And so that type of disappointment will come when you start exercising these things, but know that you're moving in the right path, right? You're moving forward, starting to understand and deal with these things. And yeah, it's going to get a little harder before it gets better, right? But as you work through these problems with these new tools, right? It's just like the first time that you fire up the rotary saw, right? It's a little shaky, the gyroscopic effect's a little hard to get over, right? But it takes a while to master it. But then once you master it, that's when you start sharing it with other people, right? And it's the same thing for this stuff. Some other ones are challenging your previously held beliefs, right? It kind of gets into those cognitive distortions, but also the fact that this has never been really talked about. And the previously held belief that I run into all the time is, well, this is such a new age problem, right? Oh man, this new generation, they're all jacked up. They got feelings and emotions, and they get hurt all the time, and it's not, right? Being a third generation firefighter, and then plus just having 20 years on the job, there's plenty of people that I came on with that were fire gods to me. They could walk on water, right? And now I look at them 10 years into retirement, they have no family, their wives left them, their kids disowned them, right? Because they were great fire slayers, but they were horrible fathers, right? And so it goes back to that the fact that those previously held beliefs were that it was okay to be a retired first responder and be an alcoholic, be angry, be the guy nobody wants to step on their lawn, right? That was just, oh yeah, he's an old fire captain, don't worry about that guy, right? And that's what I'm here for today is to challenge those, because that shouldn't be okay. It isn't okay, right? And the last thing I want to be is 10 years from now retired and I have nobody to retire to, right? The whole reason I was at work for 30 years was to have a family, to take care of my family, give them a great life, send my daughter to school if she wants to college if she wants to, right? And just provide a life for them. That's why I worked for 30 years, right? But then to throw that all away because of those previously held beliefs where it's all right to be a drunk and an abusive verbally, right? And it's like, no, that isn't okay. And then directly attempt to change the source of the stress, right? Go right after it. It kind of goes into that extreme ownership aspect of it, but it's a lot of times we want to shy away from it, right? Because it's unfamiliar, right? It's like, oh, I don't really know what that is, especially if it dives into the emotion-focused stuff, right? It's like, no thanks, I'm out, right? But what I urge you, and one of the fallouts to learning about this stuff is I'm more engaged with the younger members now. Because before I would train simply on monkey see, monkey do, right? As far as the physical aspects of it, right? But becoming more mentally aware, right? And engaging that mental education helps you to relate and be more empathetic both to other coworkers as well as patients, right? Things that or calls that I would normally just blow off as it's no big deal, right? I find myself now understanding this more and being able to kind of side with the patient a little bit and have a better experience not only for myself on that call, but for the patient as well, right? And then obviously viewing the problem through a religious perspective. Okay, so those are all coping mechanisms and strategies, right? But what can we do to help out those to where we don't have to relate to those every single one? So these are stress-reducing activities that you can do to just help bring the stress down that isn't that threat, right, that you have to go through the coping mechanism for, right? It's more of just the stress-reducing activities of the everyday stuff, right? The first three are the obvious ones, right? Sleep, balanced diet, and exercise, right? We've heard that ad nauseum for our entire careers. Well, that's all cute and everything, but when call loads have tripled in the last 3 years and resources have dwindled, you can write that off most days at work, right? And so it's important to take rest periods, vacations, right? Find joy in activities. Most people that I ask, what do you do for fun? Oh, like me personally. Oh, I fly fish, right? Oh, okay, when's the last time you did that? Right? And most people are like, like 5 years ago, I think, right? So that's the one thing you do for fun and you haven't done it in 5 years. Why, right? And it's starting to focus on yourself, right? Rather than push it away, right? Focus on the things that make you happy and do them, right? Practice relaxation. If you would have told me 3 years ago that I would be doing some of these things, I would have told you you're out of your mind. No way, right? And as I get into them, you'll see, like, literally 3 years ago, you could have said, yeah, you're going to be doing yoga and you're going to set up a contrast therapy at your house. I'd be like, no, that's way too woo-woo for me. I'm out, right? But when you start doing these things, you start noticing that your daily outlook is just a lot brighter. And it helps stop that day-to-day from building up, right? Things like massage, yoga, right? I say yoga, a lot of people kind of balk at that. Being married to a yoga instructor, right? Even I did. Because it was like, that's your thing, that ain't my thing. Well, I found a specific type of yoga. It's called Hatha yoga, or it can be referred to as 26 and 2. But basically what it is it's a hot yoga, but it's the exact same 26 positions and 2 breathing, or 26 poses. My wife would get mad at me if I call them positions. 26 poses and 2 breathing exercises every single time, right? So my nature is I like everything organized, very precise, right? And so for this type of yoga, I don't have to worry about going from dog to dolphin to turtle, and being lost the entire time and walking out of there more frustrated than I did walking in, right? This is the exact same, and I can track my progress, and it's my jam now. I do it as many days a week that I can when I'm home, and it just sets my day off right. For me, I was always the guy, go to the gym, work out, right? And then as I started going through difficult times, it was go to the gym more often, try a new workout, whatever jump on a box, sure, whatever the flavor of the week was, right? And it got to where I was walking out of the gym more angry than I was walking in. And then I just was like, this ain't working, and I just dropped it all together, right? And so yoga has kind of been my new thing, where I do it in addition to the gym, but I urge everyone to try it at least 3 times, and report back to see how you feel. Prayer, for obvious reasons. Okay, meditation. This is about mindfulness, meditation. There's a ton of apps, phone apps nowadays that they have both the music, a meditation music that I like to do it's actually on Apple Music. It's Yoga Sound is what it's called, or Pure Yoga. I'm sorry, Pure Yoga, and it's just you throw it on there, and it's just time to spend with yourself reflecting. You can add this into your brain dumping exercise. And just spending time on yourself. Cold plunge. This is super popular right now, even though it's been around for millennia. I mean, the Vikings used to do it to prepare for battle the next day. But cold plunge, it has its benefits. Sauna has its benefits, especially infrared. And then something that I got shown by my wife was contrast therapy, right? So it's the best of both worlds. So basically it's 15 minutes in the sauna, 2 minutes in the cold plunge, and repeat one more time. And for me, I kind of use it as a Ritalin. For me, I'm a pretty hyperactive person. I usually have survived most of my life in 4 to 5 hours of sleep. And that was always fine for me. And I just kept powering through, and it was what it was, right? Well, the first time I tried contrast therapy, luckily for me, where I live, they have a what they call a modern spa experience up there, and that's exactly what it is it's contrast therapy with the saunas and the cold plunges set up already. And my wife was urging me to do it, and so I was like, you know what, I'll give this a try, whatever, right? We'll see what happens. So I went, did it. It takes an hour, better part. An hour, went home, took a shower, and I was like, hey, I'm gonna go lay down for a bit. And my wife's like, yeah, no problem. Well, that first time I did it, I slept for 16 hours, right? It was the longest I've ever slept in my entire life. Like back to teenage days, I didn't even sleep that long, right? And so now I've put it into my routine where every time that I come home for work, because I work long stints, because I work or I live out of state, so I do long stints at work. And the first day I always schedule to do it, and then have since built the entire setup at my house. And I do it every night before I go to bed. And it's mind-blowing, the difference. A lot of people say, with the cold plunge, they feel energized for the day and they do it in the morning. For me, like I said, it's like my Ritalin. So I take it and it puts me right to sleep. And it's, it's another thing that I urge everyone to try. Progressive muscle relaxation is an exercise where you basically, it's kind of a mindfulness exercise. You can sit in a chair and you basically, when you're feeling stress or overwhelmed, you just kind of work your way up from your toes all the way to your scrunching your forehead and every muscle in between. It's just about kind of being mindful with your body. The cold showers. So a lot of people, they see all these activities on there and they're like, yeah, man, when I'm at work, I can't do any of this stuff, right? We're going to get a call and on we go, right? So cold shower, right? I urge this one for the people that, just get off the phone with their loved one, kids messing up at school, and, you're at a 9 or a 10 and, what we call, break up corner in the back of the parking lot, right? Where you go to talk to your family and you're peaked out, right? Nobody's going to notice you walk in, change over, jump in the shower real quick. You don't have to tell nobody. But instead of getting into the shower, turn it all the way to cold. And don't turn it all the way to cold and go, whoo, it's cold, and turn it back to hot, right? I'm talking turn it to the cold and stay in there as long as you can. And I guarantee you, whatever you were mad about before you got into that cold shower, it'll go away real quick, right? Because you go into survival mode and all that goes right out the window, and then you get out of the shower focused on what's important, right? Rather than whatever argument or what have you were just involved in, right? And then obviously the mindfulness, right, is kind of the overwhelming theme, is taking a moment, right, where you're feeling that stress rise up, right, rather than getting trapped in that reoccurring thought pattern or the problem solving where you just can't get around it, can't solve it. There's no, that feeling of hopelessness. It's taking that moment of mindfulness to just be like, hold on a minute, let me focus on myself, where I'm at, take a couple deep breaths. There's the breathing exercises, right? The box technique's super popular right now because everybody likes to say that it's, all the Navy SEALs use it. Well, it's funny because the Navy SEALs use it to take sniper shots. It's to slow your heart rate down. But they've developed this breathing exercise. It's, the 4 seconds in, 4 second hold, 4 second out, 4 second pause, right? Box technique. But it's about any of those breathing exercises, and you can research, like I said, the one good thing about your phone. Research all these things on your phone, and I urge you to. Because they may get a couple jokes at the kitchen table, especially the next couple that I'm going to talk about. But the thing is that the difference is that change to where before nobody would have ever talked about yoga at the kitchen table, to where now, yeah, you may get made fun of the first 30 seconds, but I guarantee the guy will come up afterwards and be like, hey, dude, yeah, I was talking to a buddy that said it was super helpful for his flexibility, right? And then on you go, right? And so it's being the difference maker and being able to talk about these things. So stimulating your senses is another way to reduce your stress, right? So sight, reading, artwork, setting those parameters to where it's, I don't expect you to take in a novel and read the entire novel at work. That's not really setting yourself up for success. That's just going to add to the stress level when you don't do it, right? But just taking that book in and doing a couple pages. And then a lot of times reading might even help if you're studying for promotion, studying for certification, where you're doing a bunch of time in the books or your volumes or the NFPA or the IFSTA books, right? Taking the time, setting apart, reading a couple pages in your book and going back to whatever you're reading before, just kind of resetting yourself. Okay, sound, listening to music, playing an instrument. We have stations that they've actually set up like these music lounges where they have like multiple guitars and stuff like that where guys will jam at night. And it's just a way to kind of come down from the day. Tactile, polishing, okay? I always think back to the old school engineer that, after dinner, everybody was wiping the rigs down for the day, and the engineer that never wanted you to touch their rig, right? You'd go out there, young member on the job, oh, here, sir, let me help you, and he's like, don't touch my rig. And you're like, geez, man, all right, fine, whatever, right? But what was actually happening is that was one, his sense of control, right? And then it was also him basically taking the day and completing it, right? It was his task to wipe down that rig. He's responsible for that rig. He's the engineer, but it was a way for him to surmise that day and bring it to a close, right? And that tactile stress reduction can be done with that simple task of wiping the rig down or polishing a tool, right? Having a job, completing that task, and finding solace in that completion of that task helps to reduce stress, right? Welding, woodworking, coloring, those silly-looking books that you see at the checkout line, right? All crazy psychedelic stuff, right? Is actually very stress-reducing simply for the fact of the same thing back to polishing, right? You have this fancy-looking coloring book, you're coloring in, you complete it, job well done, right? It's the same as all the other things of puzzles, baking, sewing, knitting, cross-stitching, all those things where it's something that basically takes your mind off whatever problem-solving right brain thing you got going on, takes you over to the left brain and starts doing something in the arts, right? That's that stimulating the senses thing. Now the next one, getting outside, right? Great stress reducer is vitamin D, right? Being outside, getting that sun on your back and your chest is the best places that it gets absorbed. Making sure you don't have sunglasses on when you do it. It really helps that vitamin D level up and helps reduce stress. Second one that's on there, which is actually the first one, is grounding or earthing. Scientific facts basically state that by being in contact with the earth without shoes on can help stimulate things to reduce stress. Okay, just a quick kind of thing that I kind of go over, an example. We had a coworker of mine that was, we were kind of working through it together over the course of some time on the ambulance, and he was like, man, I just keep going home and I'm at an 8 or 9. I keep checking in with myself and I'm like, I just can't come down, whether it's the talk radio, whether it's the, 3 monsters on the way home, whatever the case may be, I just can't come down. And so we basically worked on a thing where he goes home and I go, do you have a park? You live in a tract of houses. Do you have a park by your house? And he's like, yeah, I got a park. I go, well, California traffic at 15, 20 minutes isn't going to make any difference, right? So when you go home, stop at the park, take your shoes and socks off, and walk around in the grass for 15 minutes. Leave your phone in the car, right? And see how you feel. And so he did it for a while, and now he's upped it to almost 30 minutes that he does it. But he says it works great. And so it does work. And there's plenty of science. You can research it on your own about how much whether you want to talk about the placebo effect of, oh, well, yeah, he's just being mindful for 15 minutes. Well, whatever it is, it works. And so that's why I urge you to try any of these stress-reducing activities that may aid you in keeping that stress level down and having successful outcomes every day. So is it enough, right? So this is out of the Navy. You guys being peer support members, I'm sure you've seen it with the peer support training. That's where this comes from. So it's out of the Navy, and so it basically has your kind of sliding scale of whether it's your personal responsibility, some help with some family, friends, and then when you need to turn it over to some professional help, right? And the main culprit here is whether you have that stressor, right? You're good to go, you're well trained, you have that stressor, and maybe it's a mild and a temporary anxiousness or irritability, right? But it doesn't last, it's not long term, right? You're injured in that orange section as it's more severe or persistent, right? That's still into your inner circle, but it's when those stress injuries that don't heal, right? The ones that persist, they get worse, or they may get better, and then it comes roaring back, right? That's where you're gonna wanna reach out to professionals that do this for a living, right? And can give you other things other than just the basics. Okay? The self-awareness and the group awareness, right? That self-awareness of knowing when normal coping mechanisms aren't working or they're not working as well as before, right? So everyone walked into this room with coping mechanisms that they use, whether they were aware of them or not, but through your upbringing, your life experience, right? You've developed coping mechanisms that help you deal with stress every day, right? But now I want you to go forward with not only the new coping mechanisms and stress-reducing activities that I showed you today, but simply the understanding of when you're using it and you're swimming a little harder than normal, right? And then the group awareness, the big challenge, right? That recognizing behavioral differences in the people around you, checking in with people, right? Being confident in yourself to reach out to people that you may see that are struggling or exhibiting some of those examples I said at the beginning, right? And sometimes it's just reaching out and showing that you care, right? Big thing for us is the people that have been off injury, right? Reaching out and checking in on them. They've been off for a little while. Reaching out, could be the people in your immediate area, your station, another shift, another station, right? Reaching out and checking in on them, right? Being a sounding board or just providing advice, or sometimes it's just that active listening, right? Where you're just listening to them talk and hearing those reoccurrent things they keep bringing up where they're just begging you to ask them about it, right? But they won't say they need help with it, but they just keep bringing up that their kid's struggling, and they just keep mentioning it. No matter what story they're talking about, they always mention the same thing. And that's where it's that active listening keys in where you go, is everything all right with your kid? And then they just dump it all, right? They just need just a little nudge, right? And just being that person for them, regardless of where they work or who they are, and just being that sounding board. So who can help? One thing that I don't want a bad taste put in anybody's mouth by reaching out to someone that they may not know. I can tell you 3 years ago, if you would have asked me what the difference between an MFT and a psychologist was, I'd be like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I don't even know what an MFT means, right? So my thing is if you're gonna reach out, especially for us, because we always wanna know before we go, right? So my thing is to explain all of them so that when you do reach out, it's to somebody that you have the right expectations for. So a psychiatrist, it's a medical doctor who diagnoses and treats mental, emotional, and behavioral disorders, right? The psychiatrist is the one where if you want it to be numbed and deal with it later, psychiatrist is who you talk to, okay? A psychologist is a person who specializes in the study of mental and behavioral activities. They may perform research or work as a therapist or both, right? A clinical psychologist is a psychologist who is trained and licensed to diagnose and treat patients with mental, behavioral, and psychological disorders. Okay, those are the clinical ones are the ones where you get all that verbiage, right? The depression, anxiety, bipolar, schizophrenia. Okay. A therapist is a healthcare professional trained in methods, treatment, and rehabilitation other than those use of drugs or surgery. Okay, and then the big dog of the therapist is the marriage family therapist, right, or the MFTs, okay? Is a therapist trained to develop a theoretical approach towards treating by focusing on the mechanical relationships as they pertain to marriage, family unit, and or other group, okay? Just in synopsis, right, psychiatrist is the one that gives you pharmaceuticals to aid in your care. Psychologists may do the same thing based on their research, but the marriage family therapists are the ones where you bring the suitcase and the sack lunch because we're about to dive into it, right? Marriage family therapists is a no joke all the way back to your childhood and all the way back up, right? Some people see them just for the marriage counseling. Some people just see them for their own therapists, right? But that's what you should expect. If you really want to get to the bottom of the problems and understanding, an MFT is who you want to see. Okay, and then a licensed social worker is the one that we usually deal with in the 911 scenario because that's the person who follows traditional psychological approach towards counseling, which provides individual treatment, and then the referral to the psychiatrist. They're kind of the go-between from the psychiatrist and the pharmaceutical treatment. Usually for us in LA City, it's the homeless community that we deal most with the licensed social workers. But that's the whole gambit of people that deal with mental health problems. Okay. Ones that can help, right? These are on a state and a national level. Okay, so just CPF alone has the Healing Our Own website. It's really cool. I urge you to check it out. On there, kind of going across there, they have the CPS Firewire podcast on behavioral health that's available there too. And there's some other ones up there, Firestrong. IAFF has their Center of Excellence. And then obviously your department peer support team usually has some go-tos as far as if you're looking for help. There's always people to reach out to that have tools for you locally. And then also I urge people to check into their own insurance. They've come a long way in basically mental health on an insurance platform. And so you have to check with your own department's insurance. Most of them, if it's Blue Shield, Blue Cross, all these outside agencies and outside therapists are covered. It may be a little bit difficult with the billing as far as basically lumping it together into a super bill and then forwarding it to the insurance and then retroactively, sending you a check after you've already paid for it. A reimbursement, that's what I was looking for. You have to check with your insurance and see how they do it, but never hesitate going and seeing someone and worrying about the payment later, because a lot of times there's outreach programs, whether it's through your union, through your relief association, that help reimburse those things if the case arises. So just some quotes about stress that I found both inspiring and therapeutic at the same time. So there's more to life than increasing its speed. If the problem can be solved, why worry? And if the problem cannot be solved, worrying will do you no good. It's not the load that breaks you down, it's the way you carry it. Doing something productive is a great way to alleviate emotional stress. Get your mind doing something that is productive. And in times of great stress or adversity, it's always best to keep busy, to pour your anger and your energy into something positive. So in closing, okay, remember everyone processes stress in different ways, but the important thing is to process it. Taking a proactive rather than a reactive approach, trying to get out in front of it, right? Learn about these things or go to the therapist before it gets out of hand, right, as a maintenance kind of thing, okay? Have that self-awareness to know when your normal coping mechanisms are requiring more effort or they're not working altogether, right? And that goes for your group as well, right? What we expect on the fire ground versus real life. Okay, a lot of people, they go, I don't want to reach out. I don't know what to say. It's not my business. right? And a lot of the people that you talk to that are around the bad outcomes for this stuff is always like, oh man, I just, I never even knew. I didn't know what to say. I know he was struggling, but who am I? And so I take you to the fire ground and the expectation of the fire ground. Okay. The one thing that we all have in common is the fact that during our firefighting, if something happens to us, the person next to us is willing to give their life for them. No questions asked. Let alone arriving at a structure fire with reports of people trapped that we've never met before. We don't know who they are. Doesn't matter. Right? We're willing to lay our life down for those people we don't know. And so what I challenge all of you now is to go back to what I was just talking about, right? For the people that didn't want to reach out, didn't know what to say, right? If that's the expectation that you have for complete strangers, then what should be the expectation that you have from your brothers and sisters sitting right next to you at the kitchen table? Which brings me to my next point. In the fire service, we have what is nationally known now as a Mayday, right? Button on our radios, it signifies a Mayday, right? There's three things that signify a Mayday, right? Down, missing, or trapped. So the Mayday in life, you may have a button on your radio when you're at work, right? But the button when you're at home is that send button on your phone. Okay, so if you're feeling down, just life, things that are happening to you, right? Or you're missing from your family members, from your kids, from your buddies, right? Or you're feeling trapped underneath just life and what it's thrown at you. I urge you, just like you would in a fire, when you take that assessment and you give those 60 seconds to try to get it out of yourself and fix the situation and you can't, right? And you hit that button, you call that Mayday. I urge you to use that Mayday in life of that send button on your phone and reach out. Reach out to your peer support members, reach out to your loved ones, reach out to your buddies at work, reach out to your therapist if you have one, right? Or reach out to me, call me, and we'll figure it out. I don't care where you live, what time of day it is, what time zone you're in, call me and we'll figure it out. Because I've been there. I've been there, down the deepest, darkest hole, and you feel like you're the only one and nobody would understand. And I guarantee you that if you reach out, that it'll all get better. Thank you guys. Appreciate it.